we doing, people? Here we're back for another episode of my take on what's going on in the world. I wanna kind of drop back to some of the stuff I talked about in the beginning episode. That was the first one, but I also want to kind of bring us up to speed. Kind of where we're at with the politics anyway. And then I got a really good story about railroad, Amtrak in the '90s. Some things that happened that I was involved with that was pretty major in my life, and I think probably throughout the country. Made it all the way to the George Bush, the first one, George H. Bush, and Congress and whatnot. We'll talk about that. But let's start off with what's going on right now with politics anyway, or that affects everybody. I mean, it literally affects everybody. So the problem actually is a good thing. Problems for Democrats and a good thing for conservatives or independent-minded thinking people, even the libertarians. I mean, is that history's too short. I mean, what I mean to say by that is, um, back in the day, say let's just use John F. Kennedy assassination for example, and Martin Luther King at the same time, pretty much. Well, that was a while back, right? That's 50 years ago. They finally released information, and now it's coming out, and they're still holding back, and this and that. But I mean, most of us that knew already knew that it wasn't a conspiracy. It was real. I mean, the government had a part in it. The government wanted to silence both voices from the black culture as well as, our government. I mean, these individuals were trying to work together and bring peace and unity within a country, and there was forces trying to stop them. And those forces within the government, which now we call a deep state, but those are bureaucrats, not so much elected officials. They're just people that have a lot of money and people that have a lot of influence, and in the government too as well. Vice president, he was part of that whole shit. So anyway, my point is that the history's too short now. We can look back at the election and the talks about fraud and all that stuff. And you're not going to go back too far in history. You're not going to go back 50 years. You're going to go back a couple of years, and you're going to still remember exactly what happened. So all this stuff with people getting, cancel culture on YouTube and all these different social medias from mentioning the word fraud. I mean, it was just ridiculous, and it still is. And maybe that'll come around, and we'll get to the bottom of it sooner or later. It always comes back. But in this case, I'll say again, history's too short. You can't just say, "Oh, that never happened. Oh, that never happened." I still want to know what happened to that semi truck, UP, United Postal Service truck trailer that was stolen. That the guy went on TV and reported to say they stole my truck. It came out of New York City. It was going to Detroit or wherever it was going with ballots, and just got stolen in the middle of the night. And that just went away. We never even heard about it. No different than I was talking about Rudy Giuliani, getting fucking lawyer's license taken away by the bar. I mean, really? And Sidney Powell just disappearing, one of the best attorneys in the country. You don't hear about it no more. It's the same thing with everything going on. I mean, it's what they don't tell you. What happened to these people? Where are these people at? Why did it happen? You don't hear about it. It's like that semi truck. Until I get some answers, I want to know what happened. Otherwise, there's some stuff that don't make sense. And so again, it's got to make sense. So the cover-ups and the lies. I mean, the lies are just so outlandish. Outlandish. They just come to a point where you go, what? What are you guys talking about? Are you making up something else again? And then later you find out it was a lie. They made it up. They just take things way too far. This progressive movement or these activists, they go way too far with it. I mean, as far as even changing definitions of words to make them what they're not. I mean, right now we're doing this DEI or DIE, whatever the thing is, DEI, diversity, um, equity, and inclusion. Well, let me tell you, we've always had diversity and inclusion. I've already said that. But this equity now that's taking the place of equality. Listen, we've always pushed equality throughout the civil rights movement and everything. I mean, even when I was in high school, we had diversified occupation where we've always been diversified and we've always been inclusive because, I mean, that's part of the same. You include everybody with your diversity. And then the equality is that everybody gets the equal opportunity to try to learn and try to educate and better themselves. I mean, that's what life's about. And that's what we always pushed. But now all of a sudden, well, it's been the last couple of years anyway, maybe less, but close. They threw out equality or equity. Well, let me tell you about something about what I believe in the equity. It's what I have in my house. When I buy my house, whatever I made equity into it, that's above and beyond what I paid for it. That's the equity in it. Or if you buy a vehicle, usually you lose equity, but I mean they depreciate pretty quick. But yeah, you buy older cars or even used to be Harley Davidsons and they held their value and even gained value, so that's equity. You can't get equity out of humans. I mean, if you're going to talk equity with humans, then you're talking slavery, you're talking child pornography, you're talking child trafficking, and women trafficking, because they all profit. People profit from that. They make equity out of that. They can make a profit by paying $1,000 for a kid and then turn around and selling her or using her for sex slave or whatever. I mean, that would be equity. But equity in the workforce and equity in society as far as humans, it's impossible. You just can't do it. I mean, because you can't take two people and say, hey, the outcome of your guys' life is going to be exactly the same because we're going to push equity. Well, that doesn't work. What if you have a handicapped person or a special needs person, which I have a son with special needs? He's never going to drive a car. He's never going to have a really good paying job unless it's made for him. Um, and I hate to say it, but I mean, we used to always joke about it as kids and stuff, and growing up because they had all these programs for social programs that he'd be a Walmart greeter, right? It's kind of a joke, but it's not really. I mean, because that's what you know that we do as society. We try to help everybody. Um, and my son's, he's a smart kid. He's smart as heck. But I mean, as far as equity outcome for him as compared to one of his brothers, it's never going to be the same. I mean, it just can't. Um, and I love them all the same, and they're going to try their best to be best at whatever they do. But we've got to just take that word equity out of there and get back to equality and say, hey, as long as we get everybody the same chance, the outcome's going to be whatever it's going to be. I mean, we're going to give everybody the opportunity, be inclusive with it, be diversified with it, try to do, equal for everybody. And that's going to be in different ways. But the term equity has got to get out of talking points. It's got to get out of everything. I mean, the government, Biden has put everything into equity, not diversion and inclusion. That's already been there. It's this new word equity. So we got to be careful what people change definitions of words to that don't meet, what we grew up with as a baby boomer, old school. I never thought of equity ever to be in human. I thought it to be in material things. Um, But I mean, that's my opinion, and I think it's pretty close to the reality, and it's causing a lot of problems. So, with that said, it's no different than racism. I mean, we use this word racism has no meaning no more because there really is no racism. There's racist people, no doubt about it, from all walks of life. But racism, systemic, and whatnot, that's everything that the government's brought forth and made it seem like, yeah, we're just so racist here, and every politician, and it comes from the schools. It's being taught that way. And of all places, the schools that are teaching the racism has zero racism in the schools. I mean, they have so much DEI that it's unbelievable. So you can't even. I mean, we've lost the rights. I don't even know if they even debate in college no more. They used to have college debates in high school. You're on a debate team. Well, since we've excluded a conservative viewpoint in society, and this all came from the colleges and academia from way back in the 70s, 60s maybe even, but 70s for sure. Really started heavily in the 80s, and then by the 90s that I can look back and remember. I mean, I'll have stories about that too and tell you where we got to for accountability in every aspect of life. We have zero accountability for anybody, and I'll go into that in a later another later episode because I really want to make that like a whole episode. So I just want to touch base on that a little bit, and then you know if, I think we finally got into a place within our politics in the last several months, say at least since January when the new Congress came in. Um, we got a group of people in there, besides some that were already there that have been really fighting hard for America and to stop all this BS and all the lies and all the everything happening. You see investigation after investigation because that's what these people ran on to the point of things are so out of control that we have to have people that we can vote in there that will, I don't care if they're independent, libertarian, they just can't be real progressive activists because those people are trying to ruin America. And we know that. And we see it every day. So I want to be a voice to try to, at least from my standpoint and my look at it, say, hey, it's got to come to an end. I mean, so these people that got in there, I want to mention someone because, I really watch politics real close, especially the last couple, 3 years, but maybe the last 2 decades. But the last, at least since Trump, in 2016, I really paid close attention to politics. I've been forced into it in a sense. My medical kept me on the couch for a long time watching news. Then when like I said, I moved here to Florida, kind of medical problems still for a couple of years, kept me watching news and kept me getting frustrated. And so I finally, it's time to speak out. And so these people in Congress that I'm talking about, yeah, I mean, you got a guy, Jim Jordan, just solid as they can be out of Ohio. This guy is, he's an animal when it comes to right and wrong, and he believes a lot. Obviously, what I believe, I'm a conservative-minded thinking person. I always wanted to think of myself as independent, but anymore, they rephrased that, so there is no independence no more. It's either you do it or you don't do it, right? Period. I mean, and that's what's going on. If you don't do what we say, we're going to cancel you, or we're going to freaking, you're going to commit, you end up committing suicide. I don't know. I'm not suicidal. Okay, I'll give you the old Jesse Smollett. I'm not suicidal. Um, so if I end up dying from suicide, But anyway, so some of these people, like I say, Jim Jordan, solid guy. Matt Gaetz. Florida has some good representatives and got a couple of new ones, but I mean, Florida is pretty solid with their representation. Um, this guy named, Representative Mass, solid guy. Man, the guy just says what he thinks, and it's like they try to stop him or they try to shut him up and stuff. He's like just basically just said, nah, nah, just shut the fuck up. This is my time. We finally got people in there that'll say that. We finally got people in there to stand up to the Democrats that have been in power that have just ruined this Congress. I mean, Nancy Pelosi just flat out ruined one of the worst bitches ever to be in Congress, besides Hillary Clinton. Those two are hand in hand. Um, the day they both get out of politics will be the day that I can rejoice. I mean, it was good. Now, for me, it was like when Ruth Bader Ginsburg died. That just did wonders for men. I mean, she was, yeah, a woman's advocate. Everybody loved her, blah, blah, blah. But she was a man hater, and everything that she did for women, it took away from men. I mean, you added stuff for women, which deservingly, I mean, don't get me wrong, I think that the women's rights movement was great. And I think it should have always been, so time it showed us that. But then it got there again. You just take it too far. I mean, you take it to the far where men just get screwed. I mean, the women's rights movements, with child support and everything else that happened, the men were just screwed. Maybe we're getting back to kind of normal with that. Maybe we're getting back to a balance because they're always saying, hey, equality. Well, not much equality there for men. But anyway, and to think about her dying and how they represent her now, the hardcore activists that believed in her, that thought she was the greatest in the world, made a statue and it looks like a devil. I mean, it's got horns and stuff. It's an eerie looking statue to make for some woman that was supposed to be such a movement activist in her beliefs. These people made her into a devil when she died, as far as, worshiping her and showing what she was about. It's eerie. I mean, maybe I can find that picture, but pretty scary. Anyway, I can only wait until those other two ladies die, Pelosi and Clinton, because they've caused more death and more destruction than any two women in the world throughout their careers. And there's bad people. I mean, they're sinister, just evil people. And I can go over stories, and I will later. For now, I just want to put that out there to give recognition to those that deserve it, and also say, hey, this is what they're fighting against. You know, you got Marjorie Greene out of North Carolina, top notch. She came in just swinging. and she makes sense about everything she says, and she don't take shit, and she don't take the arguments. When people try to cancel her or shut her down or something, she don't back down. She's a jewel. I mean, she's a real jewel. And Lauren Bobbitt, out of Colorado, another good one. Another good one that came in this term, and they ask the right questions. And then you have a couple of Hispanic ladies, Luna, and another one. I mean, these ladies are coming in and they're asking the right questions, and they're not taking no for an answer. In the past, it's always been whatever Democrats said, that's what it was, and they were in power. You'd shut up. Well, now these people are going, no, no, you shut up, and now we're going to prove that you were full of shit the whole time, and we're starting to see that. And for me, that really gives me light and hope and whatnot. Because I mean, you're dealing against the deep state, and what's a deep state? I don't know. I mean, to me, I look at it as the fourth branch of government, I guess, or that the bureaucrats that have been there for 40 years on a government job, almost like a tenure. They know they can't get fired, and they're in positions where they can keep secret about what they're doing, but yet the outcome of what they do is devastating. And they've been in the power for a long time. And it's in your top government agencies. We got more agencies. We've created more agencies. And they're talking to oh, we got 17 different agencies that said Trump's no good. Well, why do we have 17 different agencies? None of them talk together. None of them actually say, hey, well, CIA talked to FBI, and they came to the same conclusion. No, they're all on different pages. They're all getting paid out of different funds, and they all got different motives. And most of them were weaponized to drown out conservative voices and to arrest people and to shut people down. That's got to come to an end. And I think there's enough people right now that it's going to happen. And people in America got to, know who you're voting for. Yeah, we get it. New York and California, you guys are going to vote the same way all the time. But the rest of the country, we got to pull out and say, hey, we got to save this country. We got to keep capitalism. Yeah, we got socialism already. We already got all these programs. We don't need to take them away, but we need to look at what we got and what we're doing and make sure let's get back on track for America and not for everybody else. I mean, I got another thing I want to go into that is going to be an episode, so I don't want to go into too far, but school shootings. I mean, it started off with Columbine. I remember that being the first one in Colorado, one of the most liberal places in the country, and I guess we can find out why. They started it all. With a couple kids that were rich kids that I don't know why. I don't know why. Nobody ever explains. Nobody ever really goes into the root cause of these children. I have my opinion. I want to go into it later, but we need to get to the bottom of it and find out. It's got nothing to do with guns. Listen, I mean, well, whether somebody's going to go stab somebody or run over somebody with a car or do whatever. I mean, we don't outlaw knives, and we don't outlaw cars, and we blah blah blah. The guns aren't the problem. I mean, this argument of getting rid of guns will not solve the problem. And the people that argue to get rid of the guns are the people that want criminals to have guns to kill you. Simple as that. I mean, how can you have laws that say we got to get rid of the guns? New York's a good example. Chicago, California, they want to get rid of guns so bad for legal people, but people that want to protect themselves, they don't want to give them guns. But criminals that go out and commit murder and stuff, they might arrest them. I don't know. Sometimes they don't arrest them. Sometimes they arrest the other person that killed them and said, hey, he's the murderer. They're going through that right now with that bodega dude from New York that the guy came in, his wife came in and used a phony credit card, and she went back out and he said no. He went back and got her boyfriend. He came in and started beating the hell out of the guy. And the guy picked up a knife that he had sitting there and stabbed him, and he got it for murder. How does that work? No, how does that work? I don't even know how that works. And the same guy that put him in for murder in New York, Alan Bragg, is the same guy that's trying to convict Trump because he had sex with fucking Stormy Daniels, whatever, however long ago. And, Jesus Christ, look at Kennedy, look at Clinton, look at them all. I mean, he wasn't even president. So it's just a joke. I mean, hopefully our system will put a stop to it. And like I say, the people in Congress are smart enough now, the Republicans, to start playing the same kind of politics that the Democrats have been playing for decades, and it's backfiring. Now it's turning on a little bit. And then the last thing that I'm going to talk about in another episode, but needs to be addressed right now, is transgenders. Back when I was a kid, and I'm looking back and I can remember, we called them transvestites, or trannies, or he she's. I mean, they were just a dude dressed like a woman, because they might have had some sort of issues with their mom, or who knows. I mean, talk to, psychologists that put them in a room and try to get in their head, and it's concealed information, so you can't even find out the truth. But in my opinion, yeah, there's something going on there. I mean, I'll go into a story about me and working with a transvestite, and it's a good story. But there again, it's down the road. Another podcast. I don't have enough time to do them all at once. And the last thing I want to talk about is I want to defend Trump a little bit. I mean, I never knew the cat. I mean, I met him first when he came down to Esquire, like everybody else. But everybody else, a lot of people knew him from whatever. I never watched The Apprentice. I never watched. I knew of the guy from The Apprentice maybe, but I didn't know who he was. I didn't know his background. And he's a rich, just another rich, arrogant fuck to me. Um, and I'd never voted in my life, never, for nobody, for nothing, because I didn't trust any of them. I didn't like any politicians. I thought they were all crooked. But then in 2020, after Trump had 4 years, and I watched this man do the things he did, and like I said back then, everybody hated him, so that was the guy I wanted, man, because y'all hate him. Well, they tried so hard to get him out of office, impeach him twice. We went through all that. Um, but he's really, if you look at him, he's relentless. I mean, he's been investigated throughout 7 years, which we went over, and he's made it through it all. I mean, because there's nothing on him. So why are we still even messing with him? And why are we still using his name 2 years later and blaming him for everything? Oh, the Afghanistan, no, that was all because of Trump, because of Afghanistan. No, it wasn't. No, it wasn't. Let's make this clear. It had nothing to do with Trump. All Trump did was his policies, his time frame, his. And then once Biden got in office, like he just changed everything Trump did. It didn't matter if it was good or bad. He just wiped it all out. And going into Afghanistan, this is his policy. This is what he wanted to do. This is the time, 9/11, he wanted to make it a big date. So, 9/11, kind of like January 6th, it's the worst thing that ever happened besides Pearl Harbor and 9/11. Oh, bullshit. Geez, 9/11 was nothing. It was a protest. It was a peaceful protest, period. That's why we're upside down. Um, so I want to go into, I want to talk about Trump a little bit because I will defend the man. And I will say, he's the best thing that ever happened to this country. Yeah, he might be a narcissist. He might be, they all are when they get that level and not rich and they're in a different world. They don't talk to the people like me. I mean, I'm just your average guy. I worked all my life, retired from the railroad, had my own business for a little bit. So I know business a little bit. I know a lot about budgets and costs and schedules. I've dealt with that all my life. And that's Trump came in saying, "Hey, he looked at shit and everybody started looking like, oh, what this guy? We got to get rid of this guy, and that's what's been going on. So I just want to leave it with that when it comes to the actual politics of this podcast, and then I want to drop into my story for the podcast on Amtrak. I got an Amtrak story. So back in the day, it was either 80, 89, between 89, 90, 91, somewhere. It might have been 90, 91. Um, anyway, so when you work for the railroad, one thing you're always taught, and I was taught by old school guys. I mean, some of the oldest school guys, when I got hired in 79, these guys were ready to retire, so they've been there since the 40s and 50s, I guess. Um, and these are guys that were hardcore workers, hardcore, give you good advice, tell you what you should and shouldn't do. And I'll go into that story later too with the railroad and some of these guys because they taught me a lot. Um, but one thing I always learned right from the get-go was never hold up the train. One of the old timers used to tell me, he was my assistant foreman in Centralia, Washington, where I started, and he would say, um, never hold up that train because your paycheck's on it. That's your bread and butter. Basically, meaning, well, as long as you keep the train running, you get paid. But the other thing was, Amtrak runs on a schedule. There's 6 Amtraks a day, or 6 or 8. I think it's 6. 2 in the morning, 2 in the afternoon, 2 in the evening, and they run both ways. 3 one way, 3 the other on the West Coast, and they go around the whole country. Um, and there's so many of them, so that's just their schedule. And you never hold up Amtrak because Amtrak has authority and rights because of being a scheduled train. That if you hold them up, I mean, they've got uh, uh, regulations in there and and they charge. I mean, they can find a company that owns a track that holds their Amtrak up, that holds their train up, because they don't own track. They subsidize from the government, whatever they can't make on ticket sales, which is not enough to keep the Amtrak running. So we, as the government for transportation, we subsidize it. Well, so when they run on different lines like BN, UP, those were the big railroads at the time back then, and I think maybe SP merged in with BN. But anyway, so if you held up a train on one of those lines on Amtrak, you could be fined up to like $5,000 a minute, or whatever it was. It was outrageous. Scare tactic. Oh, you hold up a train, you're gonna have to pay this and that. So anyway, like, yeah, whatever. So back in that day, and they still do it today. And this is kind of a political thing too, as well. You'd be out there working as a laborer or a crew, and sometimes you go out there without foreign Bs, which is what trains know you're out there, or you get permits, and trains know you're out there with these permits. It's kind of like getting a written piece of paper saying that track's yours, whatever track it is. It's usually two tracks, so if you want one of them, you talk with dispatch and they give you a train. But anyway, so a lot of times you go out there in those days and you try to work under fire, which means you're working on live track, but what you're doing is no equipment on there, so you just got to get clear of the train when you hear it coming. A lot of times you hear the whistle blow or you listen to the radio, and they're getting close, and the schedule of the Amtrak's, and right behind the Amtrak during the day is usually the mail train right behind it. So that train's coming right behind. So that's why you don't hold up trains, because it's very important with schedules, commodities, different, everything gets ran around by the rail because the roads and truckers are, you know, they do both. We have many ways of transportation and transporting goods, but railroad has always been the number one, probably at least in America. I mean, they got more power than their own government, right? They're their own little governments, and they have regulations and rules that they can supersede what normal society has that they can't. Um, so we used to call it the poo poo choo choo. So Amtrak would come by as you're working out there, and they would purposely. You'd hear the engineer talk to the conductor, which is in the back, and they'd say, "Hey, the crews are up here around the curve," and they'd almost like time it so that they dump the holding tank, which is where you go to the bathroom, you shit, you piss, women do their thing, and then it goes into a holding tank in the train. Well, once that holding tank gets full, they don't have no place where they stop and dump it, like you should do if you're really environmentally correct and you're trying to do the right thing for society, and you're I mean, you used to give the railroad a hard time. And you go out there and work in the streets of Seattle, or work in Denver or Colorado or something. You got to put witches caps, which are just like drain. You take the covers off the sewers, storm sewers, and water storm sewers, and also any other storm sewers. You got to put. They call them a witch's cap. It's just basically fabric that you put in there and then put the lid back on. So nothing goes in there. It's got to filter through the fabric, and so you don't be dropping oil and shit into because those storm sewers go out and hit rivers and oceans, blah blah blah. So you would think that they would figure out something with the holding tanks, but what they had since Amtrak was probably started, and since they had bathrooms on them, is that they had a policy that if you're driving 35 miles an hour, that and you weren't going over bridges, which is a waterway, or in the city limits, or around men and equipment, that you knew were out there, because we do foreign Bs, and the trains have to call you and say, "Hey, we're coming through your limits 2 miles away." They got to call you, and you got flags out there, just kind of like red, green, yellow, and you put them up, and you put a red board out there and say, "Yeah, you can come by the red flag." And if you don't tell them they can come by the red flag, they got to stop there 2 miles away. But if you tell them they can come by, then they just go through, and you can tell them what speed, you can tell them all kinds of things. I mean, you can tell them whatever. Hey, you got to come through here at 10 miles an hour. So they come through at 10 mile an hour. If you tell them normal track speed, they'll come flying and do whatever speed is. When you're working there live without permits and without foreign Bs, then you're out there just on your own. They just sneak up on you, and then you just got to bail out of the way. And I remember this particular story happened it started off in Napavine, Washington, on a hill, on Napavine Hill we called it, and the train was coming, so we all jumped out of the way, and it's not like you can jump out of the way on a roadway or or out of the way to where you're clear. It's no problem. It's like you got to go down the bank. You just got to clear the train and put your head down because it's going by you at 60 miles an hour, and you don't know if it's going to dump shit on you or not because it dumps shit on you every fucking day almost. Well, sure enough, here come the train, and I heard the engineer tell the conductor, they're up around the curve, coming up on them, just passing with the engine. Next thing you know, we get dumped on. And yeah, they're not on the radio, they're not laughing or nothing. They're doing it kind of, nonchalant. But what happens is they think it's a game, fucking dump on these laborers, that's why there's always a battle between train crews and track guys, Brotherhood of Maintenance Way and the UTU. And, I don't like train guys. I just don't. I mean, maybe nowadays it might be okay, but back then we called them hogheads because, I'm not sure what they call it. I call them hogheads because there's fat fuckers running the engine. Um, there were some good ones, obviously, but most of them were lazy and like we talked about Ohio train derailment. I mean, that could have been just a lazy fucking engineer that didn't want to walk his train and go back and check that out and just blew through it, blew through the detector, the wheel detector when it was saying, hey, you got a hot box, and he just, fuck it, I'll catch it on the next stop or when I switch out next and have somebody to help me. And it might have been so bad that it just wiped out the whole train because a human error. That's a good possibility. That might be the answer. I don't know. They're not going to tell you. Nobody's going to tell you because there again, we live in a world of secrecy, though we don't, especially with this administration, they don't tell you anything. So anyway, my Amtrak's ready. Let's go back to that. So we got shit on. And so the guy that was with me, 35 was his name. we bent down, train went by, we were bent down, hovered down, and you could always feel when it dumped. 'Cause it dumped right on the end of the tie, and you're only a couple, 3 feet off that tie, and maybe down about a foot or two from the train. It's barely going by your head at 60, 70 miles an hour. I think even that time it was 79, so it's flying by you. That just almost scary, but you get used to it after a while. It's just all right, get in the clear. Well, I mean, when the train goes by and all of a sudden you smell all the shit. I mean, it's a ratchet smell, but it happened every time. And so I looked over at my buddy after the train went by. I looked over at the smell. I was like, "Fuck, that stunk." And I look over and he's got a fucking string hanging off his face with a part of a tampon, right? No, I mean a woman's tampon that was in the toilet got dumped, and I mean you'd see toilet paper and little shit all the time when they dumped. And I was like, fuck. And so I'm laughing, and he don't think it's funny at all. I mean, he's just like, oh. I said, hey, dude, you got fucking tampon on your face. And he's like, took it off. He goes, that's not funny. That's not funny at all. And I said, no, dude, from where I'm sitting, that's funnier than hell shit. That's the funniest shit I've ever seen. I said, you know what? I'm tired of this shit. I'm just fucking tired of it. So I write a letter to the company corporate office. I got named who I could write to with PR and stuff. So I wrote this letter saying, Amtrak's are out here dumping on us. Is there something we can do? Because, we got this AIDS virus starting up for a while now, and needles are coming out of there. I mean, it's just all kinds of weird shit. And I don't want to get AIDS working. I don't want to go to work and work my ass off and all of a sudden go home to having AIDS. And at that time, it was mainly the gay community that was getting AIDS. Yeah, and then from there it went to drug use and everything else because now we find out it's transmittable through different ways, mainly through needles or sex or whatever it might be at the time, what they thought. Uh, but a lot of needles. I mean, so when you'd see the needles come out of the dump area too, because people would drop needles in the toilet and shit, I guess. I don't know. I'm sure, yeah. So anyway, I sent this letter in. Well, about a week later, yeah, it was about a week, maybe two, my boss came to our morning meeting and said, I've got this letter from corporate. And he looked right at me and said, this is probably because of you. Like I'd done something wrong. I was like, whatever, what do you mean? Well, and the letter said that any train that comes through a Form B, which is where you put it out the day before to the dispatch, and then the next morning when you go to work, you got a Form B out there, which allows you to go out and work. And before anybody can come in your work zone in that Form B area, if you got it on both tracks, one track, whatever it is, we were working on crossovers, so we had both tracks in this Form B. So either train coming either way, they had to call us first. called my foreman because the foreman's always in charge of the Form B, answering the trains. Hey, yeah, you can come through normal track speed, whatever it is. So that day, they read this letter to us and said, listen, if this happens to you, here's what you need to do. Get on the radio, stop the train, wherever it's at, stop it, and let them know that they'll be, and then the company will send, through this policy, because they have, when a train goes dead, they're going to work 12 hours a day. Sometimes those trains go dead at weird places, and that's part of the dispatcher's challenge is to figure out how he gets this train here to get they call it Brown's limousine, which taxi service or a transportation service in the area I worked. It was called Brown's Limo. They were out of Vancouver and Seattle. Vancouver, Washington, Seattle, Portland. And so they'd go pick up crews wherever they might be. They call it going dead. Wherever they might go dead, they'll go pick them up. Before they pick them up, they bring another crew with them to change, and then that crew takes that train, goes, and the other crew goes to a motel, whatever they're close to home or away from home, whatever it is. Um, so we'd read this letter and said if they do that, stop them. Let them know they'll be pulled out of service, another crew will come, and then there'll be an investigation to find out what happened. Because at this point with this letter, it wasn't supposed to happen again around men and equipment. It's still going to happen all the time because you still got to dump these holding tanks. You don't have no place to dump them. So it still happens all the time. Well, so once they read the letter and stuff, we went to work that morning. And this is ironic because we go to work that morning in the Form B down in Kalama, Washington, Washington State. And we're working on crossover, changing out ties. So you got to pull the spikes, with the claw bar, and then you jack up the track and you pull the plates off, and then you got machinery that will pull the tie out and put a new tie in and spike it, kind of with machinery. Some is handwork, obviously pulling the spikes and sometimes spiking it back in with a spike mold. That's all handwork, right? Part of the machinery you have plus hand. Anyway, I was a laborer. Actually, I was an operator, but he still worked as a laborer in that day. And so I was off the machine and train called. Well, we had them coming through at 10 mile an hour because it was 75 mile an hour or 79 mile an hour track, but we didn't want them coming through there because we had spikes pulled with what you call crippled track. We had already crippled the track to where we were going to change every other tie, and you can't do that safely at full speed. 10 miles an hour, you can run over it all day long. So we crippled all the track, and then we were taking out ties, putting them in. So then you let a train go by. You don't stop the train. Just let them go by at 10 mile an hour, and they keep moving. Dispatcher don't like it because it slows them down. Sometimes they're long train and short train, what. But this is an Amtrak, so they can slow down and speed up pretty quick. And so he called them through, my foreman, and said, come through 10 mile an hour. I got men and equipment working, blah, blah. And they're like, okay, coming through. They answered back. They're coming through, and I'm looking at this train as he's coming through. We're all on the side of the track. We dropped our tools right there next to the rail. Someone were laying, my claw bar was laying right there on the ties, right about where the shit dumps. So anyway, we're standing back, train goes by, and I'm telling the foreman, I said, that train's dumping. He's dumping shit right on our fucking work zone. And the boss, he was my age, maybe a little younger, and he was like, so Spalding, what do you think they're going to stop doing it? I said, no, you were right there when they read that letter. He goes, what do you think that letter meant? You think it was for real? I said, yeah, I do. I do. And so the train goes by, dumped his shit all over our stuff. And after the train passed, the foreman goes, all right, let's go back to work. And I looked down at the claw bar that I was supposed to be using, I threw down, that I was going to pick back up. Well, it had fucking turds on it because it was only going 10 miles an hour. So normally at 35 plus, 35, 45, whatever, when they dump this stuff, they're going fast enough that it hits and it just dissipates everywhere, right? It just disappears. All you get is a little bit of, yeah, you might see some toilet paper, you might see part of a turd, whatever, but nothing like this. This guy was going 10 miles an hour. The shit was just going plop, plop, plop. So stuff was just dropping out. And when I went to go pick up my claw bar, when the boss said, let's go back to work, I looked at my claw bar and there's fucking toilet paper on it and a turd right on the handle where I'm supposed to pick it up. And I'm like, no, I'm not picking that fucking thing up. He goes, Matt, we got to get back to work. This is bullshit. They shit on us. And so I told my buddy, I said, I'm going to need you to grab that for him. And he's like, what? I said, he was a good friend of mine. I said, hey, I just want you to put a bear hug on him. And so my buddy grabs him, and I fucking pull the radio out of his side. And I get on the radio, I'm not qualified. Well, I'm qualified. I've been there a while, but uh, I'm not authorized to do this. And so I'm just a laborer, nobody. And so I called the train. I said 1795. I believe it was 95. It might have been 1796. I don't remember which way it was. It was going south, so I don't know if south was even numbers or odd. Whichever it was 1795 or 1796. Anyway, I called the train. Said, yeah, you're going to need to stop your train. You just shit all over men and equipment. Just like that, I said it, just like that. And got real silent on the radio. And then all of a sudden, the engineer, the conductor who was ever answering, said, oh, we're sorry about that. We didn't mean to dump on you. We know we're supposed to. And I said, so I got back on. I said, sorry, don't cut it no more, buddy. I said, you need to stop that train right now, and there'll be a Browns limo will come pick you up and bring another crew, and you people will be taken back, and we'll have an investigation. That's what I was told. Stop your train. And the guy's like, 1795, stopping. All stop. Came to a stop. There again, a little story about you don't hold up Amtrak for no reason. Never. Well, instantly, instantly, dispatcher's calling the train, going, what's going on? And he's like, well, we've been stopped by the crew here in Kalama. Apparently, we dumped our holding tank on them in a Form B, and dispatcher's like, ah, shit. Okay, so he had to make arrangements off the radio. He's on the phone. He's trying to get another crew. He's trying to do all that. And this train's just dead stop, just past us a little. You can see the tail end of it, not moving. And you're thinking, oh, and everybody else was like, my boss, he was freaking out. I mean, he was just freaking out. Just, oh, fuck, we're in so much. Why'd you do that? And this and that. And I was like, fuck you, piece of shit. And I liked the guy. I mean, we actually, but at that point, I was so fucking mad. I was the one that got this whole thing started with the letter. And then all of a sudden, first day after the letter, during the first day of the letter, they fucking dump on us. And you're just like, what the fuck? So anyway, go and I go to the bungalow, which is a signal thing right by it's a signal house. And inside, in those days, they had a telephone, a landline, they call it. So the signal maintainers would go in there and make a phone call and stuff before you had cell phones and all that shit. We had them, but they were kind of beginning and cheesy. Um, Anyway, I go in there and use the phone, and I call the Portland Tribune, and I explain to them what happened. And then I call the Seattle Times, and this cat don't understand me. He's like, I don't know what you're talking about. I said, well, let me explain it to you like this. It'd be like driving your motorhome down the freeway and just dumping the holding tank, having somebody in the back would have a lever they can just dump it on the freeway, and it just goes everywhere. This is what the Amtrak's do. He's like, what? I said, yeah, let me tell you a little story. So I told him a story about the tampon with my buddy that got hit, and he's like, what? Well, they reported it went live on the evening news. My grandma called me from across the state on the eastern side, Yakima. That's where she lived, and I lived on the western side around Centralia. Well, at that time in Winlock. And she goes, well, Mike, you're on TV. You're on TV. And I said, what? She goes, yeah, you were just on the news. Well, that evening it went so far up the ladder. I mean, this news got a hold of it. Obviously, I called them and tried to push it. I called the Sierra Club too, which is the environmental club. Told them what were happening. Nothing happened. I mean, nothing happened. They were like, oh, okay, okay. These are the big, environmental groups that don't even want you fucking pissing in the river. Um, Now they're shitting all over people, and it's okay. So anyway, it was either Cairo 7 or King 5 news station in Washington, in Seattle, that grabbed the story that evening, and it was Connie Chung. I remember this pretty distinctly, standing at the Amtrak station, Union Station, Seattle, reporting on this with my name and 13-year vet of Burlington Northern, um, complained and blah, blah, and was talking about how the trains are dumping and explaining they're not supposed to dump in the cities and blah. And as it's pulling into the station, the cameraman's right on the train as it's dumping, maybe 10 miles an hour. Live TV. The thing's dropping fucking shit, pulling into the station, which is not supposed to do. Anyway, it was a pretty major issue right then. And it ended up, the union got a hold of it, Brotherhood of Maintenance Way. It's useless. Useless union. I mean, the railroad unions are just useless. They sell you down the road every time. Um, but anyway, the union got a hold of it. No, yeah, we're going to take it all the way to the top and class action lawsuit. And they filed one, and it went to all the way to the Supreme Court, and then it actually ended up going to Congress, to where George H. Bush, the first Bush, um, listening to John McCain, who was the senator head of transportation, overseeing transportation, um, they decided to pass a law that gave them 10 years to research the problem of Amtrak dumping its holding tanks and how they could you know, remedy this. Well, that would have been probably 2001, 2000 when that was supposed to happen. And by that time, I'd have been out of BN, went to work for myself in my own business for 3 or 4 years, and then went back to another rail company. And at that point, it was like I thought about going back or sending a letter to Congress to find out what the fuck was going on. But I was out of the element. I wasn't even working next to the tracks like that. I was still working on the railroad, but it was a branch line. They didn't have Amtrak. So you didn't have that problem no more. So I guess being selfish in a sense or not following through what could have helped a lot of people and maybe done nothing because nothing's been done since because it's a pretty big issue. Um, so that's what came out of that. And it was a major news story that went all the way to Congress, went all the way, so I was pretty proud of that. I mean, I thought that was one of my highlights of my life to say, hey, at least I stood up and said what nobody else was saying. Everybody else was thinking it. Everybody else was feeling it. Everybody else fucking had shit all over them from when trains flew by and fucking dumped. Nobody liked it. Nobody, not even the old timers. But they were just the same way everybody else around me was like, shit happens, man. And no, it don't. No, we let it happen. No, I'm not gonna let it happen. Not without a fight. But anyway, so that's how that whole story went, and um, probably a little more to it, but really that's the gist of it. I mean, I got some other stories about holding up Amtrak. Like I say, you're not supposed to hold them up and all, and that was one story I have. I got two more that held up Amtrak as well, which could have cost my job, and I'll explain that one later. But anyway, I think I'm gonna wind her down on this cast here. I don't want to get too carried away, too long-winded with it all. Um, but I do want to make those points, and I hope you know we as a society can really get a grip on what's going on and try to find a balance for both sides. I mean, I don't have nothing against anybody. I mean, really. I mean, other than Nancy Pelosi and Hillary Clinton, those are the only two human beings that I really despise. Maybe Chuck Schumer, that I really despise in life. I mean, those two ladies have done worse things that anybody could even imagine. And they do it in the name of children, and that's Pelosi's, so we do it for the children. Really? You cut their dicks off because you want to do it for them? She's part of the whole shit. And it's not nothing about, mutilating children is the right thing or wrong thing. It's all about politics. It's all about money. Who's paying into it, and what can we get out of it? How can we screw the conservative minded people by making them feel bad that they're against this kind of shit. It goes right back to everything. Abortion. What do they call abortion? I mean, the other side calls it health care or something. I mean, they've got a name for it, like it's a good thing, right? I mean, how do you take abortion and call it women's rights for reproduction, health, health care, reproduction rights? Well, abortion and reproduction don't even go together, for one thing. So there again, we just say the opposite of what it really means. You know, like the Inflation Reduction Act. It didn't reduce anything. It inflated everything, and they knew it when they did it. But it was just like, well, we'll give it this name, and then that'll make it sound good. It's just like abortion. Oh, we'll just call it women's health reproduction or reproduction health. And it's like, no, bullshit. That's bullshit. Anyway, enough of all that. We'll talk again. I hope that you know I can keep following up on some of this stuff and keep people in at least a mind of, even if you're libertarian, independent, and you think you're a Democrat, but you really have these hard feelings that's going against everything Democrats are doing. It's probably because you're not really a Democrat. It's probably because you're more independent than anything, and maybe you ought to go back to that independency. I mean, maybe he really should because I mean we have all these people I'm talking about in the House. I mean, you got Chip Roy, you got Kevin McCarthy, you got some of these good people in there. Brian Donaldson, great guy. I mean, Biggs, Mike Johnson. These are guys that are really smart, and they're just like they're onto something that maybe they just keep going. Don't stop. I mean, keep the pressure on. Keep the lies going, or keep the lies being unfolded from the Democrats. You got to keep the pressure on, and you got to do it with facts. And don't let this whole bullshit of science says or it's like we're taking things that are factual and even scientific factual and turn them around to something. Oh, no, that's not it. Nah, that's bullshit. And we gotta figure out some way of stopping that. Letting these people do this. 'Cause it's not a majority of people, and everybody says, oh, half America's this. No, no, no. No, it's not. It's probably closer to three quarters to seven-eighths of America think the same way. And then there's that, you know, one quarter or less, small percentage of advocates and just whacked out people that are trying to change everything. And we just can't let them do it. I mean, we got to figure out that way to be on the offense and not always on the defense. That would be my suggestion. For you people out there that don't really watch much YouTube, or you do watch it, I don't know what you watch, but I got a few people that I watch because a lot of my information comes from not the news media. It comes from social media. It comes from YouTube, Spotify. It comes from people that are going out there to campuses and to different places and interviewing people that you're listening to in real time. And you're thinking, oh, Jesus Christ, these people are whacked out. These college kids are whacked out. And so, I mean, you got people like Russell Brand, Michael Knowles, Candace Owens, uh, Crowder, Steven Crowder. I mean, Jordan Peterson, um, Matt Walsh is another really good one, and Charlie Kirk, another good one. I mean, there's a lot of them out there. These are what I watch to get some of my information, all of it, but some, and I do it by not what these people are doing. I do it by how the people are reacting and talking back and saying, "Oh yeah, it just doesn't make." And you're just going, "Down. These kids in these college campuses are really brainwashed, and they really believe this shit. This has been taught for decades, so that's all they know." Anyway, we got to work on it. We got to get it right, and we got to try to do it in a civil way, and we got to try to do it without hurting everybody. I mean, without hurting other people. Too many people have been hurt. Too many people have lost their lives, and too many people have their lives ruined over nothing. I'll go back to January 6th. These people are still sitting in jail. They don't belong there at all. If you want to talk about peaceful protests and be reality, that was a peaceful protest. And so you can't put those people in jail. I mean, you're tracking them down by their cell phones, the CIA and FBI, they're tracking everybody down. If you were even close, what about all the freaking everything else we talked about, that we know about? FBI, Antifa, right in the middle of all this shit, causing it. And yet we arrest all these conservative-minded people, the QAnon guy, the shaman. Oh, yeah, he's the bad. No, he wasn't. He wasn't. No. He had a lot of conspiracy theories out there on his YouTube and stuff, but you know what? Some of them were true. Probably all of them. So they weren't conspiracies. They were just facts. And he was getting out there, and they didn't like it. So they've been after him for a long time now. Probably these 3-4 years, maybe 5. And they thought they had him, and now he's out. And now, because he should have never been in jail, ever. And there's a lot of people still sitting there in jail from January 6th. It shouldn't be there. So we got to work on that too, Congress. We got to get to the bottom of that and do it fast because these people's lives are sitting in jail for no reason. Anyway, so until next time, all I can say is have a good one. Later.